At 56, Frank Mercer came home from a 12-hour night shift with grease under his fingernails, a bad knee, and $14.62 left in the bank after his wife drained $73,418 from their joint account and vanished before sunrise. She left no note on the kitchen table, no long explanation, just her wedding ring beside the coffee maker, their savings gone, and a single unpaid notice stuck under a magnet on the refrigerator. Final warning: storage unit B17, auction scheduled Friday at 10 a.m. Frank almost threw it away. The unit had belonged to his mother, Evelyn, who had died 11 months earlier, and as far as anyone knew, it was packed with old curtains, Christmas bins, cracked dishes, and the kind of things a lonely widow keeps because letting go feels too much like dying twice. But 2 days later, when Frank paid the overdue $312 with cash borrowed from a man at work, the storage manager pulled him aside and said something that made him stop breathing for a second. "Your mother told me if your wife ever came here alone, I was to call you before I called the police." Frank thought grief had made the woman dramatic. Then he opened Unit B17 and found a cedar trunk buried behind stacks of old blankets, sealed with 2 locks, wrapped in a blue tarp and labeled in his mother's handwriting. For Frank, when Celia finally leaves. Inside that trunk was not money, not at first. It was worse, it was proof. Bank records, a hidden trust, a photograph of his wife with a man she claimed she barely knew, and a small black voice recorder holding his mother's last warning recorded 3 weeks before she died. By the time Frank understood what had been sitting in that forgotten unit, his wife was no longer missing. She was hiding. But the morning everything broke started in the kitchen, with cold coffee, a silent house, and the first declined card of Frank Mercer's life. He had pulled into the driveway at 6:38 a.m., headlights sweeping across wet leaves plastered to the concrete. November rain had started before midnight and never really stopped, just softened into that thin gray drizzle that makes every neighborhood look tired. Frank worked maintenance at the glass plant outside Toledo, the kind of job that left his shoulders tight, his hearing a little worse each year, and his hands smelling like machine oil no matter how hard he scrubbed. He parked his old Chevy beside the garage, killed the engine, and sat there for a few seconds with both hands on the wheel. The porch light was off. That bothered him before he knew why. Celia always left it on when he worked nights. Not because she was sweet about it anymore. More because she hated the dark steps and didn't want him tracking mud through the side door if he missed one. Frank got out, pulled his jacket tight against the rain, and walked inside. The house was too quiet. No television murmuring in the living room, no kettle clicking on the stove, no sound of Celia moving around upstairs, complaining about her back, her sleep, the neighbor's dog, the electric bill, or whatever had annoyed her before breakfast. Her purse was gone from the chair near the door. The framed beach photo from their 25th anniversary was missing from the hallway table. So was the small silver jewelry box she kept on the dresser. Frank stood in the kitchen and looked around without moving. The coffee maker still held half a pot from yesterday, thick and burnt smelling. Her wedding ring sat beside it, placed dead center on a folded paper towel, like an object returned to a store. He stared at it longer than he meant to. 31 years of marriage, and that was the goodbye. Not a fight, not a letter, a ring on a paper towel. His phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. Bank alert. Unusual activity detected. He opened it with his thumb, expecting maybe a gas charge, maybe one of Celia's online orders, maybe another subscription she forgot to cancel. The checking balance showed $14.62. Frank blinked once, then again. Savings once. Emergency account. Closed. The line beneath it said external wire transfer 5:12 a.m. 70,000 for Fund 821. Recipient Harbour Lane Consulting LLC. Frank stood there with rainwater dripping from his sleeves onto the linoleum. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the wall, the old pipes clicked as the heat kicked on. Ordinary sounds, married sounds, house sounds. But nothing in that kitchen belonged to him the same way it had 10 minutes earlier. He called Celia. Straight to voicemail, he called again. Same thing, he texted one word, where? The message showed delivered, then nothing. He climbed the stairs slowly, not because he expected to find her, but because the body does strange things when the mind is behind. Her side of the closet was half empty, not all empty. That was somehow worse. She had taken the good coats, the newer shoes, the suitcase, said his mother had bought them, before she and Celia stopped speaking for nearly 6 months. She had left the old sweatshirts, the broken curling iron, the Christmas sweater with a wine stain, the things that looked like life but weren't life anymore. In the bathroom, her toothbrush was gone. In the medicine cabinet, her prescriptions were gone. In the bedroom, the top drawer where she kept cash for groceries was open and empty. Frank sat on the edge of the bed. His right knee clicked when he bent it. He pressed one hand against it, not because it hurt that badly, but because he needed to put pressure somewhere. He and Celia had not been happy for a long time. He knew that. Men like Frank know more than people think. They just don't always know what to do with what they know. He knew she had grown sharper after his mother got sick. He knew she hated that Evelyn called every evening, hated that Frank stopped by after work, hated the doctor appointments and the pharmacy runs and the way Frank still said, "Mom needs me," at an age when Celia thought need should have shifted fully to her. He knew Celia had started wearing perfume again last spring. He knew she had changed her phone password. He knew she had opened a credit card in her name only and said it was for points. He knew she had been meeting someone for financial planning at a cafe near the mall, but noticing pieces is not the same as letting the picture form. Sometimes a person will stare at the pieces for years because the whole picture would cost too much. Downstairs, Frank made coffee he didn't want and called the bank. The first woman, she was sorry 3 times before telling him that because Celia was joint owner, the transfer itself may not be reversible without a dispute process. The second man used the phrase marital matter. The third person put him on hold long enough for the coffee to go cold. At 9:11, Frank's debit card declined at a gas station when he tried to buy fuel and a sausage biscuit. He stood under fluorescent lights while a teenager behind the counter looked embarrassed for both of them. Frank had never had a card decline in his life, not because he was rich. He wasn't, but because he was careful. Careful men can take a lot of pain quietly, but humiliation in front of strangers has a special sting. He paid with $7 from his truck ashtray and drove home on a quarter tank. That was when he saw the notice on the refrigerator. It had been half hidden under a magnet from Myrtle Beach, curled at the edge, probably sitting there for weeks. Lakeside Storage. Unit B17. Account holder Evelyn Mercer. Past due. Final notice. Auction Friday. Ted and A amount required to stop sale. $312. Frank pulled the paper down and read it twice. His mother's storage unit, he had forgotten about it. No, that wasn't honest. He had let it stay forgotten, because Celia said it was junk, and Frank didn't have the strength to fight about another dead woman's boxes. Evelyn had rented it after selling her little house 2 years before she died. Just until I sort things, she had said, but she never sorted things. Cancer came back, appointments stacked up, her hair thinned, her hands shook, her voice got smaller on the phone, and the storage unit became one more bill. Celia said they should stop paying. Your mother kept every butter tub she ever owned, Celia had said. Let the auction people haul it off. Frank had argued once. Then his mother got worse, and arguing about storage felt small beside oxygen tanks and hospice forms. Now the notice sat in his hand like a second betrayal. He called the facility. A woman answered on the 4th ring, voice rough with age and cigarettes. Lakeside, this is Frank Mercer, Evelyn Mercer's son. I got a notice about B17. Silence. Not long, but enough. You finally calling yourself, the woman said. Frank straightened a little. Excuse me? Nothing, you coming down. I don't know. I just found the notice. My wife was handling some of this. The woman made a sound that was not quite a laugh. I bet she was. Frank looked at the empty spot on the counter where Celia's purse should have been. What does that mean? The woman paused. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Lower. Careful. Come in person, Mr. Mercer. Bring ID. And don't bring your wife. Lakeside Storage sat behind an abandoned car wash on the west side of town. Rows of orange doors under security lights, puddles in the gravel, weeds along the fence. Frank arrived at 3:40 that afternoon, with the notice folded in his jacket pocket and a headache sitting behind his eyes. The office was small and smelled like coffee, dust, and lemon cleaner. A ceramic space heater buzzed under the counter. Behind it sat Marlon Watkins, 68 years old, grey hair cut short, glasses on a chain, and the kind of face that had spent decades deciding who was lying before they finished the sentence. She checked Frank's ID, then looked at him over the top of her glasses. You look like Evelyn. Frank didn't know what to do with that, so he nodded. She came here every month until she couldn't drive anymore, Marlene said. Paid cash, always exact. Always asked if anyone had been around her unit. Frank felt a small unease move through him. Why would anyone be around it? Marlene pulled a file from under the counter. That's what I asked her. She opened the folder and turned a page. Your wife came here last week. Frank's throat tightened. Didn't Celia? Said you sent her. Said you were ready to clear the unit before auction. Wanted me to cut the lock. Did you? Marlene's eyes hardened. No. Why not? Because your mother made me promise. Frank said nothing. Outside, a truck rolled slowly past the office window, tires crunching gravel. Marlene waited until it passed. About 6 months before she died, Evelyn came in with a notarized letter. Said no one was to access that unit except you, her, or me in your presence. She said if Celia ever tried, I was to call you first. If I couldn't reach you, I was to stall. Frank looked down at his hands. Why didn't you call? I did, twice. Your phone went to voicemail. Then your wife called me back from your number and said you were sleeping after work. The room went very still. Frank remembered that week. Celia had taken his phone into the kitchen to update something because she said he never cleared notifications. He had not questioned it. He had been tired. He was always tired. Marlene slid another paper toward him. It was a visitor log. Celia's name was written there in sharp, slanted handwriting. Beside it, a second name. Dean Corbin. Frank stared at it. Who's Dean Corbin? Marlene watched his face closely. I was hoping you'd know. He didn't. Not yet. Frank paid the $312 with money borrowed from Ray at the plant, a man who had handed him 420s too many, and said, "Pay me when your house stops burning." Marlene took the pen, printed a receipt, then came around the counter with a ring of keys. You want to open it now? Frank almost said no. He was tired. His wife was gone. His account was empty. His mother was dead. There are days when one more door feels like too much. But then he thought of Celia standing in this office, trying to get the lock cut before auction. He thought of Marlene saying, "Don't bring your wife." He thought of his mother, sick and thin still, driving here once a month, with exact cash and a secret she had not trusted him enough, or maybe had loved him too much, to say out loud. "Open it," he said. Unit B17 was at the far end of the second row, where the gravel dipped and rainwater gathered in shallow pools. Marlene unlocked the outer latch, but stepped back before raising the door. Your mother changed that lock herself, she said, pointing to a heavy brass padlock fixed through an inner hasp. Said the regular ones were for people who trusted too easily. Frank touched the lock. It was old but clean, oiled recently. That bothered him. Who oiled this? Marlene looked at it and frowned. Not me. Frank used the key from Marlene's office file. The lock opened smooth. Too smooth for something supposedly untouched. He lifted the roll-up door. Cold air moved out first, carrying the smell of cardboard, mothballs, old fabric, and cedar. The unit was packed, but not messy. That was the first surprise. Celia had made it sound like hoarding, floor-to-ceiling garbage, useless clutter from a woman who couldn't let go. But everything was stacked carefully in rows with labels written in thick black marker. Kitchen, winter, church, Frank's school, Dad's tools, photos, taxes, sewing. The labels were straight. The boxes were sealed. A narrow path ran down the middle, like Evelyn had expected someone to walk it someday. Frank stepped inside. The concrete floor was cold under his boots. A plastic Christmas wreath leaned against an old chair. A lamp he remembered from childhood sat wrapped in a towel. Near the back, behind a mattress bag and 2 bins of blankets, he saw something covered in a blue tarp. Marlene stood at the doorway. She never let me past the first row. Frank pulled the mattress aside. Dust lifted into the air. The blue tarp was tied with clothesline, neat knots tight enough that his mother must have still had some strength the day she did it. Under it sat a cedar trunk with two locks. One lock matched the key Marlene had given him. The second was newer, steel, with a combination dial. On top of the trunk, taped under clear plastic, was a white envelope. Frank recognized his mother's handwriting before he read the words. For Frank, when Celia finally leaves, he sat back on his heels. His heartbeat had gone slow and heavy. "Mr. Mercer?" Marlene asked from the door. Did not answer right away. He peeled the envelope free and opened it with his thumbnail. Inside was a single page. "If you are reading this, then I was right about her, and I am sorry, not because I disliked her. I tried not to. I am sorry because mothers see some things too early, and sons forgive some things too long." Frank stopped reading. The words blurred. He heard Marlene shift behind him, then retreat a few steps, giving him privacy without being asked. The letter continued. "The code is your father's birthday. Do not open the trunk at the house. Do not call Celia. Do not let Dean Corbin know what you found until you speak to Samuel Ortiz. Ask Marlene for the red folder. She knows." Frank read the name again. Dean Corbin. Samuel Ortiz. Red folder. The unit felt different now. Not like storage. Like a room his mother had built inside silence. He turned the dial with fingers that didn't feel steady. His father's birthday, 04/17/42. The lock clicked open. Inside the trunk were not clothes. There was a fireproof box, a stack of folders tied with string, an old photo album, and a small black voice recorder wrapped in a handkerchief. On top sat a photograph of Celia at maybe 30. He's smiling beside a man Frank had never seen, or thought he had never seen. Tall, dark hair, one hand at her lower back, standing in front of a lake cabin. On the back, in Evelyn's handwriting, Celia and Dean, 1998, before she said they met. Frank's mouth went dry. Celia had told him Dean Corbin was a financial consultant. She met last year through a friend from church. She had said he was helping them think bigger, because Frank never would. But this photograph was older than their mortgage, older than his knee injury, older than half the life Celia now claimed had trapped her. He picked up the voice recorder. Marlene spoke from the doorway, quiet now. "You need the red folder before you play that." Frank turned. "You know what this is?" "No," she said. "But your mother knew what scared her, and it wasn't dying." The red folder was in the office safe. Marlene took it out with both hands like it was heavier than paper. Inside was a notarized statement Evelyn had left with her, a copy of Frank's birth certificate, storage visitor logs, and a business card for Samuel Ortiz, attorney at law, retired. There was also a note in Marlene's handwriting from 8 months earlier. Celia came asking about auction rules, asked if contents could be sold without family interference. Same day, man waited in black pickup, plate copied. Frank stared at the license plate number. Why didn't anyone tell me? Marlene's face softened, but not too much. People who run storage facilities see too much human mess to soften easily. Your mother asked me not to, unless Celia moved first. She said if she was wrong, she didn't want to poison your marriage from the grave. And if she was right... Marlene looked toward the row of units outside. Then she said, "You'd need proof more than comfort." Frank called Samuel Ortiz from the office. The old lawyer answered on the second ring, voice dry and annoyed, until Frank said, "Evelyn," Mercer's name. Then he went quiet. "Where are you?" Samuel asked. "Lakeside Storage. Do you have the trunk?" "Some of it. Do not leave it there tonight. Do not take it home. Bring the red folder, the recorder, and anything marked Harbor Lane, Corbin, or Trust." "And Mr. Mercer?" "Yeah?" "If your wife contacts you, say nothing except that she should speak through counsel. If you still have joint accounts open, freeze what you can. If you have a home equity line, call the bank now." Frank closed his eyes. "Why?" Samuel's answer came flat and cold. "Because women who drain checking accounts rarely stop at checking accounts." By 7 that evening, Frank learned there was a pending home equity draw request for $92,000 against the house. His signature appeared on the electronic authorization. He had never signed it. The bank representative told him it was under review, not funded yet, and suggested he come in first thing with identification. Suggested, like a man could casually schedule the second collapse of his life between breakfast and lunch. Frank drove to Samuel Ortiz's office with the trunk strapped in the truck bed under a tarp. Samuel worked out of a small brick building behind his house now, though retired seemed like the wrong word for a man whose desk was covered in open files and whose tie was still perfectly knotted at 8:15 p.m. He was in his late 70s, thin, brown-skinned, with white hair combed back and eyes that missed nothing. He did not offer sympathy. He offered coffee. That helped more. Frank sat across from him while Samuel opened the folders one by one. Bank statements, copies of checks, trust documents, a power of attorney revocation, a letter from Evelyn's oncologist stating she remained mentally competent as of a date Celia had later claimed she was confused. Samuel's face changed only once, when he opened the folder marked Harbor Lane. "What is it?" Frank asked. Samuel turned one page around. Harbor Lane Consulting LLC was formed 7 months ago by Dean Corbin. Frank leaned closer. "That's where the money went." "Yes. Who is he?" Samuel looked at him for a long moment. "He was your wife's boyfriend before you married her." Frank heard the words but didn't take them in right away. Some information lands like a punch. Some lands like ice. This was ice. "No. Your mother found the connection through old photographs first, then through business filings, then through a bank envelope Celia accidentally left in Evelyn's kitchen." Frank looked toward the voice recorder on the desk. "Mother knew all this and didn't tell me." Samuel's expression did not soften. "Your mother tried." Frank stared at him. Samuel reached into the folder and pulled out a copy of an envelope addressed to Frank, returned unopened. The mailing label had been changed, not to Frank's house, to a private mailbox rented by Celia Mercer. Frank sat back slowly. She intercepted it. More than one. Samuel opened another folder. Evelyn sold her house before she died. The proceeds were placed into a trust for you. Not a huge fortune by some standards, but enough to give you a clean start. $386,000 plus a small duplex on Carlton Street your father bought in 1981 and never put in both names because he was stubborn about paperwork. Frank almost laughed. It came out broken. His father had died when Frank was 23. That duplex had been a family rumor, something his mother mentioned once as your dad's foolish little investment, and never again. I don't own a duplex. According to these documents, you do. Or rather, the trust does, with you as beneficiary. Samuel tapped the paper. Your wife appears to have attempted to redirect trust correspondence, challenge capacity, and position herself to claim marital interest before you ever knew the trust existed. Your mother suspected it. She locked the originals in that unit because she believed Celia had access to your mail, your phone, and possibly your signature. Frank looked down at his hands. Same hands that had fixed Celia's car in the snow, held her when her sister died, painted the kitchen 3 times because she kept changing her mind, worked overtime to cover her credit card, and signed forms when she put them in front of him. Because marriage, he thought, meant you didn't have to read every line like a stranger. Play the recorder, he said. Samuel hesitated. You may not like what you hear. Frank looked up. That started this morning. Samuel pressed play. Evelyn's voice filled the small office, thin but clear. Frank had not heard it in 11 months. His whole body reacted before his mind did. He looked down so Samuel would not watch his face. Frankie, Evelyn said, using the name no one else used anymore. If this gets to you, then I waited too long or she moved faster than I hoped. I need you to listen and not do what you always do. Don't explain for her. Don't fix it for her. Don't make yourself smaller so the room stays quiet. The recorder clicked softly as her hand shifted. Celia came here on May 3rd with Dean Corbin. She thought I was asleep. I heard enough. They were talking about the trust, about your signature, about waiting until after I was gone because you'd be too tired to question paperwork. Dean said you were predictable. Celia said that was why she married you. Frank closed his eyes. The room did not move, but something inside him did. 31 years can survive anger. They can survive disappointment. But some sentences walk backward through time and stain everything they touch. Samuel stopped the recording. There's more. Keep going, Frank. Keep going. Samuel pressed play again. Evelyn's voice returned. I should have told you sooner. I kept thinking you would see it. Then I remembered how long I stayed quiet when your father drank too much and called it patience because I was scared of what truth would cost. Don't inherit that from me. In the trunk is what you need. Samuel knows the rest. Marlene has the logs. The duplex is yours. The trust is yours. The life you thought was gone is not gone. It was just hidden where greedy hands wouldn't look unless they already knew they had something to lose. The recording ended with a small cough, then silence. Frank sat very still. He did not cry. Not then. He was too full of too many things for anyone feeling to get out first. Samuel folded his hands. We file tomorrow. File what? Fraud. Alerts. Notice to the trust bank. Emergency injunction on the home equity drawer. Divorce counsel referral. Police report for forged signature. Civil claim against Harbors Lane if funds remain traceable. Frank let out a tired breath. That sounds expensive. Samuel looked at the trunk. Your mother paid me a retainer before she died. Frank looked up sharply. Of course she did. She said you'd argue about cost. For the first time all day, Frank almost smiled. Almost for one night he thought maybe the worst had already happened. Then his phone buzzed at 12:31 a.m. unknown number. He was sitting in his truck outside Samuel's office, the trunk locked inside the building, rain running down the windshield in silver lines. The message was short. Don't open anything else. You have no idea what she did. Frank stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then a second message came. You think your mother was protecting you. Ask what she was hiding about your father. That was how fear got in. Not through Celia, not through Dean. Through his mother, Frank wanted to reply. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. Samuel's voice came back to him. Say nothing. People like this hate silence when they meant to make you jump. Frank took a screenshot and put the phone face down. But he did not sleep that night. By morning, the break-in had already happened. Marlene called at 6:18, voice tight and angry. Someone cut the fence behind row B. Frank sat up on his couch. He had not gone upstairs to the bedroom. The unit, they tried, didn't get in. I moved my truck in front of it after you left. Motion lights scared them off. Police are here. Frank arrived 20 minutes later, unshaven, wearing the same jeans from yesterday. A section of chain-link fence hung open behind the units. Muddy footprints led toward B-17, then back out. Unit door scratched, lock dented, not opened. Marlene stood with a coffee cup in one hand and a baseball bat in the other. You always keep a bat? Frank asked. Only when people get stupid. A police officer took a report with the energy of a man who had already decided this was a property dispute, until Marlene handed him security footage, visitor logs, and the license plate from the black pickup. That changed his face a little. Not enough, but a little. At 10, Frank met Samuel at the bank. By noon, the home equity drawer was frozen. By 2, the trust bank confirmed that Evelyn's original documents matched the copies in the trunk. By 4, Frank learned Harbor Lane Consulting still held $51,000 of the drained money in a regional account. The rest had already been moved. For a few hours, it looked like proof might move faster than Celia. Then the letter arrived at his house by courier. Petition for temporary restraining order and marital asset preservation. Celia Mercer, through her attorney, claimed Frank had hidden inheritance documents, removed marital property, threatened financial harm, and was mentally unstable due to grief. There was a hearing Monday morning. Frank read the pages at the kitchen table where her ring had sat 2 days earlier. Every line was polished. Every accusation was careful. She had taken the money, vanished, tried to access the storage unit, and now she was accusing him of hiding what she had tried to steal. That was the thing about people like Celia. They did not just take. They wanted the story too. Samuel read the petition over speakerphone and sighed. She's trying to control the first official version. Can she? Frank asked. If you walk in angry, yes. Frank looked at the wedding ring still sitting by the coffee maker. He had not touched it. I'm not angry. Samuel was quiet. You should be. I am, but not the kind she can use. Monday morning came bright and cold. The courthouse windows threw pale light across the hallway floors. Frank wore the only suit he owned, navy, a little tight across the shoulders, last worn at his mother's funeral. Samuel stood beside him with a leather briefcase. Marlene sat on a bench down the hall, holding a red folder and a travel mug. She had insisted on coming. "Your mother paid me for 12 years of storage," she said. "I can sit in a courthouse for one morning." Celia arrived at 8:52 wearing a cream coat, dark sunglasses, and the expression of a woman who expected rooms to rearrange around her. Dean Corbin walked behind her. Frank recognized him from the photograph now, older, heavier, but the same smile. The kind that arrived before sincerity and stayed after it left. Celia removed her sunglasses when she saw Frank. For half a second, something moved across her face. Not guilt, calculation. "Frank," she said softly. He did not answer. Her attorney, a woman with a sharp black folder, leaned toward her and whispered. Dean looked at Frank like a man assessing damage on a used car. Frank looked back once, then turned away. That was harder than he expected. Not because he wanted to talk, because after 31 years, ignoring someone takes strength too. The hearing room was small, but full enough. Celia's attorney spoke first, as she painted a clean picture. A grieving husband, a hidden inheritance, a wife blindsided by financial secrecy. A storage unit containing marital property, a request to freeze all assets, including Evelyn's trust, until ownership could be determined. Frank listened. He had listened to machines for a living. He knew when something sounded smooth because a part was missing. Then Samuel stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse wildly. He built the truth one document at a time. First, the bank transfer from the joint account to Harbor Lane Consulting at 5:12 a.m. Then Harbor Lane's business filing naming Dean Corbin. Then the attempted home equity draw with Frank's disputed signature. Then the storage visitor log showing Celia and Dean tried to access Evelyn's unit the week before the transfer. Celia sat still, too still. Dean stopped smiling. Samuel submitted Evelyn's notarized letter. Celia's attorney objected to hearsay. Samuel expected that. He submitted the trust documents next. Then the returned envelopes sent to Frank, but redirected to Celia's private mailbox. Then Marlene Watkins took the stand. She looked small in the witness chair until she started talking. Then she sounded like every school principal, church treasurer, and storage manager who had ever caught someone lying and decided to enjoy the paperwork. She testified that Evelyn had restricted access to the unit. She testified Celia came alone, then with Dean. She testified Celia asked how fast contents could be auctioned if family didn't interfere. Celia's attorney tried to make her sound confused. Marlene looked at the judge and said, "Your Honor, I manage 418 units. I know who pays late, who lies about losing keys, and who sends someone else to cut a lock." Mrs. Mercer was trying to get into that unit before her husband knew what was in it. The room went quiet. Not courtroom quiet, worse. The kind of quiet that happens when a story starts turning in public. Then Samuel asked to play one short portion of Evelyn's recording, not for the truth of every statement, but to explain why the documents had been preserved and why Frank had not known of the trust. The judge allowed a limited section. Evelyn's voice came through a small speaker on Samuel's table. Don't explain for her. Don't fix it for her. Don't make yourself smaller so the room stays quiet. Frank stared down at his hands. Celia looked at the table. Dean looked at the door. Samuel stopped the recording before the worst sentence. He didn't need it yet. Then Celia's attorney made the mistake Samuel had been waiting for. Mrs. Mercer had no knowledge of this trust before last week, she said. Samuel turned one final page. Then she'll need to explain this. He submitted a photocopy from the trunk. It was a letter Celia had written to Evelyn 6 months before Evelyn died. Not typed. Handwritten. Frank recognized the slant immediately. Evelyn had kept it. In it, Celia demanded that Evelyn stop poisoning Frank and accused her of hiding assets that should belong to the marriage. The trust was mentioned by name. So was Dean, though Celia had written him as D. The judge read it twice. Celia closed her eyes, just for a second. That was the first honest thing Frank had seen her do in months. Samuel said, "Your Honor, Mr. Mercer is not hiding marital property. He is trying to protect separate trust property from a spouse who drained the joint account, attempted a disputed home equity draw, tried to access the storage unit containing original trust documents, and then filed first so she could call herself surprised." Celia's attorney asked for a recess. The judge denied the restraining order, froze the remaining Harbor Lane funds, blocked the home equity draw, ordered preservation of the trust documents, and referred the disputed signature and transfer issues for further investigation. She did not call Celia a thief. Judges are careful that way. But everyone in the room heard the shape of the word. In the hallway afterward, Celia came toward Frank before her attorney could stop her. "You don't understand," she said. Her voice was low, urgent, almost like the old Celia from years before, the one who held his hand in hospital rooms and made him laugh in grocery lines. "Your mother hated me. She set this up." Frank looked at her, really looked, the cream coat, the careful makeup, the woman he had loved, defended, excused, and slowly lost without admitting when it happened. "She didn't drain the account," he said. Celia's mouth tightened. "You were never going to leave that life." "What life?" "Small, tired bills. Your mother, that house, that plant. You were happy being stuck." Frank thought about the declined card, the ring on the paper towel, his mother's voice telling him not to make himself smaller so the room stayed quiet. "No," he said. "I was loyal." "You used the wrong word." Dean stepped forward. "Careful, Frank." Frank turned his eyes to him. "You should be the one careful." "My mother kept records." Dean stopped. 4 words. That was all it took. People who build lies hate records more than they hate enemies. Over the next 8 months, the life Frank thought had ended became something else. Not easy, not clean, not the kind of ending where the wrong people suffer instantly and the right person wakes up healed. The divorce took time. The police investigation moved slowly, then suddenly. The bank recovered part of the transferred money, not all of it. Harbor Lane collapsed after Dean's other clients started asking questions. The home equity draw died before funding. Celia's claim against the trust failed. She moved to Florida for a while, then came back for hearings, then stopped looking Frank in the eye altogether. She did not go to prison right away. That disappointed Marlene, who said she had already picked a sentence in her head. But Celia did lose the story. That mattered more than Frank expected. For years, she had been able to make him feel slow, small, overly loyal, too attached to his mother, too practical, too tired, too ordinary. Now there were bank records, visitor logs, letters, and his mother's voice saying what he had not been able to say for himself. The trust became real in ways paper had only promised. The Carlton Street duplex needed work, of course. Everything Frank inherited needed work. The roof had a soft spot over the back stairwell. One tent sink leaked. The basement smelled like damp concrete and old paint. But the building was solid. His father had bought it cheap in 1981, fixed it on weekends, then handed the keys to Evelyn when his drinking got bad and he no longer trusted himself with money. Frank learned that from a second letter in the trunk, one written by his father and never mailed. That letter hurt in a different way. It did not excuse the past. It explained the shape of it. His mother had not just hidden money. She had protected the one thing his father had managed to leave clean. Frank kept working at the plant until spring. Then he cut down to 4 days. Then 3. By summer he opened a small repair shop in the empty garage behind the duplex. Nothing fancy. Mercer appliance and small repair. He used his father's old metal sign from the storage unit, the one Evelyn had wrapped in a quilt and labeled heavy, "Do not drop," which made Frank laugh alone in the unit the day he found it. He hung the sign above the garage door with Marlene standing below, telling him it was crooked until it wasn't. The first week he fixed 2 dryers, a church refrigerator, and a toaster oven for a woman who paid him in cash and tomatoes. He made less than he had at the plant, but he slept better. There are kinds of wealth that don't show on a bank screen. A key that opens a door nobody can take. A morning without dread. A cup of coffee that doesn't taste like an argument waiting to happen. Frank emptied Unit B17 slowly. He could have hired movers, but he didn't. Every Saturday he went row by row, box by box. He found his school drawings, his father's socket set, Evelyn's church hats, the lamp from his childhood hallway, recipes written on index cards, tax returns, old Christmas ornaments, and a coffee mug that said "World's Oakiest Mom," which he had bought as a joke when he was 22 and broke. She had kept it for 34 years. He found things worth money, and things worth more because they weren't. The last box sat in the back corner, small, taped twice, labeled Frank, not urgent. That made him smile, because only his mother would label something emotionally devastating as not urgent. Inside was a framed photograph of Frank and Celia from their first year of marriage, both of them young, both of them thin, both of them standing in front of a rented apartment with bad brick and cheap blinds. Tucked behind it was a note from Evelyn. "I am not giving you this so you remember the pain. I am giving you this so you remember that love can be real at one time and still not be safe forever." Don't let the ending rewrite every good day, but don't let the good days excuse the ending. Frank sat on an upside-down bin in the storage unit and read that line 3 times. That was the closest he came to crying in public. Marlene saw him from the office window and did not come out. That was kindness, too. In September, Frank closed the unit for good. Marlene walked with him to B17 one last time. The air was warm, and the gravel dust stuck to their shoes. The unit was empty now except for swept concrete and a square of cleaner floor where the cedar trunk had sat. Frank stood in the doorway with the old brass lock in his hand. "Funny," he said. "I hated this place when I first opened it." Marlene sipped from her coffee. "Most people hate the door that tells the truth." He looked at her. "You practice these lines?" "I run storage units. I hear myself talk." Frank laughed. A real laugh. It surprised him. He locked the unit, then handed Marlene the key. She didn't take it right away. "Your mother was proud of you," she said. Frank looked at the orange door. "She should have told me more." "Probably. I should have listened better." "Probably." That was why he liked Marlene. She didn't polish things that needed to stay rough. Celia sent one letter after the divorce became final. It arrived at the duplex in a white envelope with no return address. Frank knew her handwriting before he opened it. She wrote that she had felt invisible, that Dean made her feel alive, that Frank had chosen his mother over his wife for years, that she had made mistakes but wasn't the monster everyone thought. There was one apology near the bottom, surrounded by reasons. Frank read it at the workbench while a dryer belt lay beside his coffee. Then he folded it and placed it in the drawer with the other papers he no longer needed to answer. Some letters don't ask for forgiveness. They ask to keep control of the last word. Frank let her have the ink. He kept the silence. That evening, he hung Evelyn's coffee mug on a hook near the shop sink. "World's oakiest mom." Under it, he placed the voice recorder, not because he needed to play it again, but because he liked knowing it was there. Outside, the duplex windows glowed warm. One tenant's little boy rode a bike in slow circles on the cracked driveway. Marlene had dropped off a pie and complained that Frank's office chair was bad for his back. Samuel Ortiz had sent a bill marked paid in full with a note that said your mother was a difficult woman and usually right. Frank stood in the doorway of the garage and watched the evening settle over Carlton Street. He had not gotten his old life back. He had not gotten 31 years back. He had not gotten the version of Celia he once believed in back, and he had stopped trying to decide exactly when she disappeared. But he had his name clear. He had the house safe. He had the duplex, the shop, the truth, and a mother's last act of protection waiting for him in a place everyone else called junk. For the first time in years, Frank Mercer was not checking the driveway to see who had left. He was looking at the open garage door, the workbench, the old sign, the warm light, and the life that had been hidden for him until he was strong enough to open it. And if this story reminds you of someone who was drained, abandoned, or made to feel foolish for trusting too long, stay close, because sometimes the thing people leave behind is not the end of your life. Sometimes it is the first honest key you have ever held.